Going in for that first mammogram is like a rite of passage for every woman, and it's one that no one looks forward to. Mammograms have been around for over a half a century, and despite their consistency in being proven to reduce breast cancer deaths, they're still surrounded with controversy and fear. And now mammograms are back in the news because the guidelines have changed. So what's a woman to do? Well, on today's episode of Your Best Life, we are going to hear from a woman who does mammograms for a living. And she's going to help us navigate through some of those questions and some of those fears. So stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Your Best Life. I'm your host and healthy living correspondent, Beth Schomp. Breast cancer is a cancer that is formed in the cells of the breast. After skin cancer, it's the number one cancer for women diagnosed here in the United States. Now, breast cancer can be found in men and women, but obviously it's more common in women. A mammogram is an X-ray of the breast, and it is a wonderful screening tool for breast cancer. That said, it is a test that women dread, many women fear, and to help us navigate through those fears and questions, I've invited someone who actually does mammography, and she's going to help us walk through all that. So welcome, Diane Roten. So Diane, so glad to have you on here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about you in terms of how did you get into this field in the first place? How long have you been doing it?
Well, I started in '93 when I became a X-ray tech, because you need to be an X-ray tech first. Someone had told me about it, and I thought, oh, that'd be great, doing the X-rays and that, which I loved. Mm-hmm. And then 10 years ago, I decided to do mammography. Some of the main reasons: my mother had breast cancer. Since I've been a mammotech, my sister's had breast cancer. One of my best friends has had breast cancer. So probably like a lot of you out there, so many people with breast cancer. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to be able to make sure that their mammograms were done perfect, as close to perfect as possible. Mm-hmm. And everyone was getting the best treatment. And it just fit with me because I love women. So it was just the perfect fit for me to do.
Well, and I would imagine you really feel like you're serving a great purpose in your line of work, because in the end, you're in a line of work of saving lives.
Oh yeah. And there are days there's a lot of days before I get to work, I say, please let me make a difference in someone's life, because like you said, women are so scared. And when they're coming back, they've got called back for something. Mm-hmm. Everyone thinks the worst right away. So mm-hmm. It really is my job to mm-hmm. Reassure them and make it a very pleasant visit.
So I have a list of questions I want to go through with you, and they're really important. So I'm going to kind of keep my cheat sheet here because I want to make sure I don't miss anything out. So one question that many women have is, when should a woman actually start getting a mammogram, and how often should they get it done?
Okay, this is really important because there's so many doctors and other organizations telling you all kinds of things. It is important, if you do not have a family history or any kind of high risk, it is important to start at age 40. Now, if you have someone in your family or someone close to you, related, that's had breast cancer, you want to start 10 years before she was diagnosed with it. And it's very important that you come every year. A lot of people say every other year. We do not recommend that. I cannot tell you the people who have skipped a year and then you're like, whoa, had they just come back last year? So really important to do it yearly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you're really right. The hereditary lines of breast cancer are very, very strong. I have a very good friend of mine who was diagnosed with breast cancer, fought it, and she's incredibly healthy now, but her sister got it as well, also had to fight the fight. Her father got it as well. So all three of them have had to fight that fight, and they have fought it successfully. But it's those hereditary lines that are very, very strong. So the big question is, are mammograms painful?
Okay, I get this all the time. So there is some leeway there because it depends on the tech. I will agree. There are some techs that really feel like you got to compress it tremendously. But for the most part, no, they're not. I love when I get a first timer, and I tell them, I'm like, I love that I got a first timer, because they come in, they're so afraid. They've heard all kinds of horror stories, like slam it in the garage door. It's going to be a pancake. I mean, you would be surprised. And they are so nervous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I get done and they're like, is that it? That wasn't even bad.
Yeah. I can tell you.
It's not painful.
I can tell you from personal experience, pain is not how I would describe it at all. It really is not painful. There's an awkward stance to it because you have to put your hand here and you have to put your hand here and you have to hold your breath, but that's only for a few seconds. But pain is not it at all. That's not how I would describe it. Right.
I tell them it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be strange for your first one. And then when we're doing that odd position, I always joke with them and say, this is your modeling career. It is such a weird position to get in.
Yeah, that's a great thing to say. So, in today's economy, a lot of people don't have insurance. So what if a woman doesn't have insurance for her mammogram?
And that happens a lot. And women will say, I haven't come for 5 years without insurance. Check your local hospitals. Check your doctor's office. Most hospitals have a fund because we don't want any woman to, not get a mammogram.
Right.
So it will be paid for. You will get it paid for if you have no insurance and you can't afford it.
Okay, that's good.
That's pretty nationwide.
I didn't know that. So when I've gone in for my mammograms, and I go in every year, I hear this every time that my breasts are dense. Now, my breasts are small, so that always in my head doesn't compute. But in your world, small doesn't mean the same as dense.
Correct.
But why does that make a difference? Because they always emphasize it. They don't make it sound like it's bad, but they just always emphasize it. So why is that important, or what difference does it make?
So this is how I explain it to my patients. You're outside on it's nighttime. You're trying to see the stars. All you can see is clouds and big white fluffy clouds. That is dense breast tissue.
Okay.
So if you are called fatty, and it has nothing to do with your weight or anything, with fatty tissue is like you're looking at the stars and there's no clouds. So with dense tissue, you can really have so much going on in there and you can miss things. Mm-hmm. And that's where the 3D came very important, because they can look all the way through the breast, and it really has helped them see a lot more than, what they could have seen in the past.
So explain to our audience a little bit about that 3D, and I will kind of set it up for you a little bit. So it used to be several years ago that when I would go in for my mammogram, which was covered by my insurance, as part of a wellness check, it was covered by that. Then they said, do you want to opt for 3D? And at the time, there was an extra $75 or something that I paid according to my insurance at the time. So what you're saying is that gave them an additional view of a dense breast, right? But
a lot of views. So what it is, it's kind of like a CAT scan. I mean, there are hundreds of slices that he can go through, or her, when they're looking at dense breasts. So in the beginning, it's a new thing. Insurance was like, I don't know. So a lot of insurances, you had to pay extra. Mm-hmm. But once Medicare said they would cover it, everyone gets it.
Good.
And even at our place, we used to, if you were fatty, you got 2D, if you were dense. But people, even though you're called dense, your whole breast may not be dense. If you have a section of it that's pretty dense, they're going to say dense breast. So now everyone at our place, and most places, just get 3D. It's just a better way to go. But if you have a dense breast, make sure you're getting the 3D.
Right. Okay. So now another question I know that people ask is, well, if I'm getting my mammogram regularly every year, do I still have to do self-exams?
self-exams are probably, people don't realize how important they are. I would say, and I think I wrote it down here, 40% of lumps in that are found by self-exams. We have people who might have got a mammogram 6 months later, they feel something, they come back, there's something, could be there or could not be there. But it's so important. And when you're doing those, things to remember, you want to raise your arms, you want to look in the mirror, you want to check your underarms. People forget that all the time.
Right.
Look for enlarged lymph nodes, anything. You're looking for any changes in the skin, redness, any kind of dimpling, or like sometimes, let's say one nipple goes in.
Right. An inverted
You
nipple.
have that checked. Yeah. So when you do your self breast exams, you know, you can Google it, which is good because a lot of people don't know how to do it, and that's why they don't do it. But you're going to take the 3 fingers, you're going to use the pads, and you're just going to go round in a circle. And if you do it every month, you're going to be able to know, because people will say, my breasts are so dense, I can't figure it out. You will, because you've done it every month, and you've got, you know, you get to know what they feel like.
You know your own map at that point.
Yes.
So let's talk about inverted nipples for a moment, because some women are born with an inverted nipple.
Yes.
So that doesn't mean inverted nipples means cancer. You're talking about a change, right?
A change.
Right.
Correct.
Just like in skin cancer, it doesn't have to itch. It just has to change. And so that's what you're referring to, right?
And even if it changes, you know, I did a lady the other day, and she said that she had come in for an inverted nipple, and she's older. It was only one side, but she's totally okay.
Right.
But it's something you need to have checked if anything like that happens.
So breast cancer does not run in my family. 1 year I went in for my mammogram, and you know, it's interesting. I really believe in women's intuition. And I didn't tell you when you and I chatted earlier, I didn't share with you this part of my story, but I just felt like they're gonna find something. They're gonna find something. But I do self-exams, and I had a lump before that ended up being a cyst. So I didn't, you know, it didn't even have a lump. So but I know the value of self-exam. And so I was going in there knowing I don't feel anything, but I just think they're going to find something. So the tech that did the mammogram, she did everything. Then she repeated a couple of them. And then she said, stay here for a moment. Went out. She wanted to repeat it one more time. So I'm thinking she's seeing something. And I said, what are you seeing that I need to know about? She said, just sit tight. So then she had me, instead of going back to when she's done, instead of having me change, she took me out to this little, you know, internal lobby. And she said, just sit here for a moment. And then the radiologist called me, and they did an ultrasound. And that's where they found a word I had never heard of before, calcifications. And from there, I was going to be referred to a breast surgeon, because now they needed to do a breast biopsy. Now, that was very scary for me, because I thought, oh my goodness, there is a very good possibility I could have breast cancer. And I had never thought I would be going down that road. But I remember being really grateful. Thank goodness I came in for my mammogram, because how in the heck, it's not something that I could feel. The breast biopsy, just for our audience, so that, because it sounds like so horrible. This was actually, they did a biopsy, and it was in the nipple area, which is extremely tender, right? I will tell you, I didn't feel a thing, which I love. They put me out for it. They did the biopsy, and everything was fine. It was negative. But my point in bringing that up, Diane, is tell our audience, if you will, you know, what are calcifications and what role does that play in breast cancer?
Calcifications are early signs of breast cancer. So if you are found with calcifications, first of all, they're deposits of calcium. They can happen anywhere in your body, and they do. And you could have several other calcium all over your breast, but it didn't look what they call, you know, suspicious. So what they're looking for is if it groups, if there's a group of calcifications, and these things are the size of a grain of salt.
Right.
So just to let you know, in your case, you probably did have some tissue that looked funny too, because calcifications cannot be seen on ultrasound. That's so important, because these women who just want to get ultrasounds, you're missing a whole pile of it. So when they find a calcification, If it doesn't look, right away, oh, those are horrible, they will follow them for 2 years. So you'll get 2 extra mammograms a year because you come back every 6 months.
That's right. I did do that. You're right. I did.
Very slow growing. So after 2 years, if they're stable, you're good.
Right.
If in the 2 years, you start getting more in that area or something, or maybe those just all of a sudden popped up and you had quite a bit or something, they'll go ahead and biopsy it. But,
so
very common.
This is a good lead into the next question, because, it's human nature. We always try to look for the shortcuts. And
Yes.
so, whereas this radiologist suspected calcifications, I guess you couldn't see it, but she suspected there's something suspicious. Now you need to go to the next stage, which for me was the breast surgeon. There are women that might think, well, I'm not going to go for a mammogram, but I'll go get an ultrasound of my breast, or there's thermography. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those two and how they're not as nearly as effective as a screening test?
Correct.
Okay.
Out of everything out there, even MRIs, the best screening is a mammogram. When you get an ultrasound, that's great for like if you feel a lump, because it can find the cyst if you have it, or the mass, and it can tell you it's filled with liquid, it's complicated, it's definitely not looking good, that type of thing. But there's a lot of stuff on ultrasound that you don't see, like the calcifications. And there's been times we've seen on a mammogram and not seen it on the ultrasound. So ultrasound and the tomography, that's another thing, and I think what it is, they want to get out of the compression.
That is it.
The compression, because what happens if we did not compress you, then it would look funny all over your breast. So we compress it to spread the tissue out and see what's in there. So another sad story, there was a lady who came in the other day, and she's been doing the tomography for, 6 years. But she felt something and came in, and right now we're thinking it's not going to be a very good outcome. Because she did it for 6 years. She thought, that test was good, but it just doesn't show everything. So if you are high risk and you want to do the mammos, and then maybe the tomo every 6 months, or a lot of doctors will have you do mammo MRI every 6 months if you're high risk.
Right.
But nobody recommends no mammogram.
Right. You're absolutely right. And that is, I think, a really good point, is you will not find anyone in the area, in the profession of breast health, cancer, that will say, oh no, you don't need a mammogram. You won't find anyone that will give that recommendation.
I will tell you though, I've been finding doctors, and I don't know which doctors, but a lot of them they'll tell their patients after 70, 75, oh, you don't have to have a mammogram. And people ask me, how long do I have to do this? And what I tell them is, if you are healthy enough that I told you had cancer, you would do any kind of treatment at all, you need to keep coming. I mean, there are women who are in amazing shape at 80 years old and have another 10, 15 years. So the fact that they're saying, oh, you're 75, don't worry about it. I would come till the last, till you're in your upper 90s, unless you were like, I'm not going to do anything if I found out. Then you don't need to do the mammogram.
Right. So I guess my last question is, when it comes to breast cancer, what are things that we can do? What are steps that we can take to reduce our risk of breast cancer?
Okay, so a lot of it is just what you've been teaching everyone, is your overall health. So your BMI, keeping that in good shape. Physically active, I'm talking 30 minutes a day, keeping active that way. Eating lots of fruits and vegetables, not eating quite as many red meats, not smoke, the smoking, the drinking a lot, all of that, which we should be doing anyways. But some things that you can't control. If you're someone who started your periods early, or you started menopause late, or you never had kids, all those things make you a little higher risk, which people don't, realize. Breastfeeding makes you a little less risk. So, and I know we keep bringing up the hereditary thing, because a lot of people say, well, I didn't come, it's not in my family. I want you to know only 5 to 10% of people who get breast cancer is hereditary.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's
So it's 1 in 8 without family history is going to get breast cancer. So you can be the first one.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I was talking to a friend earlier today, and although this isn't breast cancer, it's still relative to the point. Is her mother is 95 years old. She has cancer. No one ever in their family has been diagnosed with cancer of any kind. And so, there's always that first. You're absolutely right.
Well, and they say too, we're women, so we're already high risk, and our age. So the older you get, just with everything else, you have a higher risk of getting it.
True. Absolutely true. So if there's someone watching today and they've never had a mammogram, and a lot of people don't even have a doctor, they go to the clinic when they get sick, what would be their next step? If we've moved them to go get that mammogram, then they don't have a regular doctor. What do they do to go start that process?
If they don't have a regular doctor, you want to call the mammo department. A lot of people will have what they call breast directors, because somebody has to follow up with them just in case something happens. And once again, if you don't have the money, you can also check with them because they will pay for those. But don't be afraid to go get one. It's kind of like when if you've ever been pregnant the first time, everyone tells you the horror stories. No one tells you, oh, you get the epidural, it's not bad, They just tell you, and one person's pain is not another's.
So true.
I can't tell you how many. I tell first timers also, if it's your first time, do it first thing in the morning. Get it over with, because you stress all day about it, and then you're like, that's it.
Yeah.
And it really is not a big deal. It is not going to be painful or anything like that.
So true. So true. It's quick in and out office visit. So, well, Diane, thank you so much. This is
save your life. So
absolutely, it save your life and save your family a lot of pain and anguish as well. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you. I appreciate all that you do for women, and I appreciate your time today. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
So for those of you watching our video, if you would do me a favor and please like this video and subscribe to the channel. More importantly, if you know someone that could benefit from watching this video, would you share it with them? Encourage them to watch it. And you're welcome to email me any particular questions, whether it's in regards to this video, or if you have requests for other subjects, topics you want us to cover, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me at yourbestlife9@gmail.com. Until next time, be happy and be healthy.